Okay, the recording's just started, so welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to another of the Teaching Academy Professional Development Series. As we get close to the end of the 2026-30 series, we are taking this opportunity to start running more sessions around supervised assessment, obviously for people that are thinking about getting on the front foot with supervised assessment for the upcoming teaching session, so 2026-60. So we're beginning those today with a session around designing supervised assessment. That's being run by Elise Hogg and Ben Ifland joining us today. So I'm going to hand over shortly to the two presenters. I will point out that you're able to use the chat for today's session, but any of the artifacts that we're seeing for today, so the slide deck, the recordings, etc., all will be made available shortly after the session concludes. And there's also usually communications, etc., that follow after any of the events that we run. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Elise and Ben. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Lachlan. Really appreciate that introduction. So hi everyone, and welcome to this professional development session, Designing Supervised Assessment. I'm Elise Hogg, Lead Advisor, Curriculum Development within the Division of Learning and Teaching. I'll be joined today by one of DLT's wonderful educational designers, who some of you here today may have already worked with, Benjamin Ifland. So this session is part of our Supervised Assessment PD series. You may have already attended one of our previous sessions, or this might be your first time joining us. Regardless, and wherever you currently are in your supervised assessment journey, this session will provide you with practical guidance to help you feel confident about designing supervised assessment in your own context. And remember, you can always catch up on previous session recordings or register to attend our upcoming sessions at the DLT website or via the Teaching Academy. During today's session, please feel free to chat and share ideas, experiences, and questions in the chat. Now, before we jump into today's session, I'd like to acknowledge country. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the many lands on which we live and work together. I pay my respects to elders within First Nations communities and acknowledge the continuity of cultures, languages, leadership, and knowledge systems. I acknowledge First Nations people's continuous connection to country, recognising the unique diverse identities and cultures of people in our communities, regions, and nation. I'm speaking to you from the beautiful lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung on Jandek country, just outside of Naarm. And I invite you to take a moment to recognise the traditional owners of the country you're joining us from today. You can do that in the chat, of course. All right, so we've tried to design today's session to be highly practical. By the end of the session, we hope that you'll feel more confident determining which supervised assessment approach, integrated or standalone, is most suited to your subjects, students, and context, and what the design process might look like and involve. We'll also share with you some practical guidance on how to design your supervised assessment and some resources to support you along the way. So we thought we'd start today's session with a bit of a pulse check. We've got a quick Mentimeter question for you to respond to. So I'll pop the link into the chat, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code on the screen, 49401153. I'll just pop that into the chat if I can find it. There it is. So the question that we're looking at today is, what elements of supervised assessment design are you most interested in learning about? And I know it can be hard to select just one, so you do have the option to select up to 2 choices today. I'll just pull up the presentation itself so that we can all watch as those responses come in. So your responses will help us both today and into the future by helping us to understand what's most needed as we continue to plan and develop supervised assessment, professional learning and resources. So it's great that we can see some of the responses coming in now. I think we've had 17 responses. You can see what we've selected most of us have selected a couple of options. So the big one at this point is those practical considerations like scheduling, sustainability and cohort size. So these will be addressed today, particularly in Ben's section. And the choice between integrated and standalone approaches, aligning to learning outcomes and connecting into professional practice, slightly lower, and then communicating with and preparing students. So just to give you a bit of a heads up, we will touch on communicating and preparing students today, but this will be delved into in much more depth and detail in our upcoming sessions. So I definitely encourage you, if this is a key priority for you, to keep an eye on the Teaching Academy website and Teams channel so that you can press the register button as soon as they come along. Right, so we've got 29 responses, which is fantastic. Thank you so much to everyone who's engaged. We will take this information away and use it to support future planning, to ensure that we are really aligned to your priorities and needs. I'll jump back into the slide show. Oops. All right, let's get into it. So if you attended last week's Assessment and Education Forum, you would have seen our Academic Director of Educational Strategy, Prue Laidlaw, share this slide. So I have borrowed this from Prue, big thanks to Prue, as it does a really great job of framing the work currently taking place across the university and helping us to better understand what supervised assessment is and what it isn't. So just a couple of key points. I won't go through everything here. If there is any other questions that you have, feel free to pop them into the chat. We do have some team members today who can support you with some responses, or we do have Q&A coming up at the end, so you're more than welcome to hold those. Ultimately, for us, supervised assessment is about real-time interaction and direct observation that allows us to confirm that our students genuinely understand and can apply what they've learned. Another really wonderful aspect of supervised assessment is that it allows us to engage directly with our students about their learning. One of the really positive pieces of feedback that we've been receiving from staff who have already delivered supervised assessment is how valuable that real-time relational interaction is and how it's helping them to better know their students and build a more relational pedagogy. Supervised assessment is also flexible and responsive to the needs of our formats, disciplines, and cohorts, and there's no mandated format. Today, we're going to provide you with a range of examples and approaches, but we remember and keep in mind that ultimately you are the subject matter and discipline experts and you know what works best in your context. Just to situate supervised assessment within course level assurance, I just want to give you guys a little bit of information about how it supports course level assurance of learning. So you can see from the image to the right how supervised assessment sits within the broader architecture of the CSU approach to course level assurance, where it provides a strategic data point within a whole of course system. And this ensures that our assessment tasks, both supervised and non-supervised, work together as a coherent system aligned to course learning outcomes. Within this model, supervised assessment provides verified evidence of students' independent capability at strategic points across the course, strengthens our confidence in assessment judgments, and supports accreditation and continuous improvement. I know I've just rushed through that slide quite quickly, so just remember that you will have access to all of this. And there is a quite in-depth piece, a resource on the DLT website, on the assessment section, that really dives into course level assurance and course level assessment in more depth and detail. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty, the practicalities of supervised assessment. There are two design approaches to consider when you're designing a supervised assessment task. The first, standalone, refers to a self-contained task. Essentially, the whole assessment item is happening under supervision. Standalone supervised assessment provides enhanced assurance of learning by requiring students to act, respond, or perform under observation with prompts or conditions that elicit their thinking and confidence. Student performance is judged on the supervised activity itself, not on a separate product. Now, Ben's going to walk you through a menu of options a little later in today's session, but in this space, you might be working to design tasks like interactive oral assessments, practicals such as labs or OSCEs, or scenario-based oral assessment. In contrast, when you're designing an integrated supervised assessment, you are taking an existing product-based task and adding a short supervised element to confirm authorship and ensure that your students can explain, justify, and defend the work they have submitted. This might look like a short viva following a written report, a conversation about a portfolio, or a Q&A following a case study submission. For many of us, the integrated approach will be the most straightforward path, as you're not starting from scratch, but instead you're taking an existing task that's already discipline appropriate and constructively aligned, and adding a supervised component that strengthens assurance without changing what's being assessed. Now, if you have already designed an integrated or standalone supervised assessment, I'm not sure how many people we have from 30 who have already kind of gone through this process, or if most of us are sort of looking at 60 and we're kind of sitting in that planning, getting ready stage. But if you have already designed or delivered an integrated or standalone supervised assessment, we'd love for you to share a little bit about what that task involved and how you decided on your approach. If you're comfortable, please feel free to share a little bit in the chat. And of course, if you'd like to expand more when we get to Q&A, you're more than welcome to do so. So how will you decide which option is most suitable to your context and students? This slide gives you some prompts to help you determine which approach is the best fit for your subject. If you're working with learning outcomes that require your students to demonstrate a skill or apply knowledge in real time, or the capability being assessed cannot be captured in a submitted product, for example, a clinical procedure or performance, then you might find that standalone is your best fit. You might consider an integrated approach where you have an existing product-based task that alone cannot reliably demonstrate the capability being assessed, such as an essay report or portfolio. And as I mentioned earlier, a short targeted supervised element can really strengthen assurance without requiring a full redesign or changes to constructive alignment. Finally, it's really important to remember that this is an iterative process. So our supervised assessment design will develop through practice, reflection and refinement. But generally, if we do start from a place where we have really considered and targeted our design, we're going to set those strong foundations to build on as we go on that journey and learn what works best for our students, for our academics, our markers and our disciplines. We're going to have a look at what's involved in pivoting an existing non-supervised assessment task to an integrated supervised task shortly. But before we do get there, I just wanted to draw your attention to the assessment design principles at Charles Sturt. I'm sure that you're very familiar with these, but I think it's always good to have a bit of a refresher and think about how we might apply these when we have changing contexts like the introduction of supervised assessment. So the assessment design principles provide guidance to course design teams, and they're aligned with the Higher Education Standard Framework and CSU policy requirements. Now, all of these principles are deeply important, but there are two that I wanted to highlight that I think have a real particular relevance in the context of supervised assessment. The first is the need for the learning activities in your subject to be intentionally designed to scaffold students to develop the knowledge and capabilities that they're going to need to demonstrate in the supervised assessment. So if we're in a supervised assessment, our students are performing in real time, often, though not always, without supporting materials or the ability to check notes. So if the first time they're asked to explain their thinking out loud is in the assessed task, we really can't expect them to perform to the standard that we're looking for. Keep in mind also that constructive alignment isn't just about the alignment of learning outcomes to assessment tasks. It also includes the learning activities and constructive feedback that prepares students for success in assessment. And I did just pull this off Google Images about 10 minutes before the session, but I think it does a good job of just, explaining exactly what's going on with constructive alignment. So again, we've got our ILOs, our teaching and learning activities and our assessment. I think often this can be kind of forgotten. So I think when it comes to supervised assessment particularly, this is extra critical. And the second is ensuring that our students are provided with student-facing assessment information that is really clear and helps them to understand exactly what is expected of them, how they can prepare, and also why the assessment is being conducted under supervised conditions. When our students know what is expected of them and why, we can reduce their anxiety, support them to prepare effectively, and help them to understand the supervised element as a meaningful part of their learning. All right, so now that I've kind of set the groundwork and the frame, the foundations, I'm going to hand over to Ben, who's going to walk you through the range of supervised assessment options available to you, both standalone and integrated, and also introduce you to a really fantastic tool that he has developed that will support with the decision-making process. So over to you, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alice. If you could just move to the next slide. Yep. So we'll start off with standalone assessments, and they are exactly as they sound. They are a standalone assessment. It's not a two-part assessment where students have submitted something and then having a supervised element. This is a standalone assessment that are conducted away from other assessments. It's helpful when students are required to demonstrate skills or judgments that can't necessarily be demonstrated through written work, or perhaps that authorship can't quite be guaranteed. So one of the more common ones that I'm sure most of us have heard of is an interactive oral assessment, which is that semi-structured questioning, prompting students trying to tease out their knowledge and understanding of the concept on which you're assessing. And I would recommend to everyone to click that link once the slides are shared to the Teaching Academy module there. It contains a lot of great resources regarding the delivery and some of the design considerations as part of an interactive oral. Alice, can we move to the next row of standalones? And as these kind of tick through, all of these, actually, I should say, are listed on the DLT website under Supervised Assessment in the left-hand menu. As we start to go through them, though, you can start to see that they become more specific to the context in which they are and the the subject on which you're assessing. So one of them is a pitch, which works for some different disciplines, won't work for all. But if we take a subject from 30 that developed a pitch assessment where students created the pitch, they had to set realistic expectations, timelines, goals, identifying potential risks, and then the management of those. They presented their pitch and then went straight to a Q&A with a marker, which they were asked specific questions regarding their pitch. Those questions weren't pre-written. They were developed and not developed. They were asked after the presentation, so they could be specific to that student. Can we move along, please, Alice? And here we get some very, yes, and here they are very discipline specific. Yeah, a practical lab assessment isn't going to work in quite a lot of our different areas, but it will work in some. And that's part of the consideration that we need to go down when we're looking at what sort of standalone assessment we're going to design for our subject. Keep going, please, Alice. And sorry, again, there's 3 more that are very specific OSCEs and work placement ones that are excellent in some consideration, some disciplines and subjects, but don't always work across a wide variety as the top few did. And as we've got in the chat there are some lovely EDs who are working and helping design these specifically for your subject. I know I worked with Louise, and Ingrid worked on MGT 553, which is the pitch one I spoke about earlier. So we've got some examples there, and there'll be more examples being published as we keep going. If Alice, we could. So we'll move to integrated assessments. Now, this, away from standalone, these are assessments in which you're taking an existing product-based assessment, whether it be a choice from the 12 on the screen here, or there's another slide there as well. And you're adding that supervised element to it. It's not so much designing a brand new assessment, it's taking an existing one and adding a supervised element for it. The reasons and how that supervised element will take place will come back to the purpose of it. Is it looking to guarantee authorship, or are we looking to further assess the process of learning and the reflection skills of students? One such that we helped, sorry, I'll keep going through, Alice, yep. So one that we helped to design, and I'll say we, but it was myself and Louise who in the chat earlier put it in there. We took in a pre-recorded presentation video that students submitted to their Brightspace page, and then they booked in a supervised discussion, a mini Viva, and Louise then was able to ask those questions to try and get further information and elicit some of their understanding to guarantee that authorship. So when we're looking at a integrated assessment, we're looking at the product, which we've seen a whole range of. Alice, could we go to the next one? And then we're looking to marry that to a supervised element. And the supervised element, the one in which we're going to choose, is going to come back to that purpose of what you're looking to assess there. And I won't read out everything on the screen. There's quite a lot of information there. You'll see that the keywords there kind of think about what aspect of the assessment you're going to be looking at, and how the students' responses might be changing based on those. So all of these, again, are on the DLT website under that assessment and supervised assessment on the left there. A quick note here is the mini Viva versus interactive oral. There are times where we tend to use those interchangeably. A mini Viva is more structured than an interactive oral. An interactive oral is, you can't pre-script it. It's an ongoing process throughout the entire interactive oral, whereas a mini Viva is a little bit more structured in the questioning and the ways in which it's conducted. Alice, could we keep moving forward there? Thank you, Lachlan, for popping that link in the chat. So here we have a few more supervised assessments. These ones down the bottom start to look at that reflection piece, which is, we start to think about the aspects in which the assessment is assessing, and potentially we start to look at with the students reflecting on how they made their decisions, and what approaches did they have and why did they have those approaches, or did it change their approaches? Alice, if we could keep moving. Yeah, so to help to help you along the choosing of the supervised assessments, we're slowly developing a selection tool. It's at the moment in draft, so it won't be shared, but we'll demonstrate it in a moment. It's an interactive tool that will help kind of guide you through some of the considerations to take when choosing a supervised assessment. We're talking about cohort size, subject level or year level of the subject, the weighting of the assessment, and the purpose. We're looking at, do you want to add a supervised element to an existing task, or are we looking at designing a whole new assessment? And then at the end, we arrive at some guidance notes for you to take away to get you started on that process. And if that doesn't quite get you to where you need to be, you can always contact an ED to kind of get some of that further guidance and more nuanced approach. Alex, if I start sharing my screen, we might go through some of the pathways. That should be sharing now, is it? Excellent. So you can see here, it's very simplified. Question 1, what is your cohort size? These aren't set numbers, but we'll choose small for now. What is the year level or subject level? We're looking at, let's say today, we're looking at a first year entry level sort of subject. This question, do you have an existing assessment task that is weighted over 30% that could be adapted? This starts to think about which assessment you're going to be taking of your subject that will be redesigned to have that supervised element. Let's say, yes, we do. Okay. Does it contain an existing assessment, an essay, a report, design, or other project that cannot fully guarantee authorship or depth of understanding? So we're starting to look at what are our supervising element going to be assessing. So let's consider to redesign it from scratch. to be a standalone because we don't necessarily like it, okay? Let's choose judgment and decision making are going to be our primary parts that we're going to assess. And then we arrive at a standalone supervised assessment, possibly a scenario-based oral assessment. We've got some implementation tips there. We've got some other options to consider, some considerations for context, and then we will hope to have links to some resources or templates that you could use to develop and deliver a successful assessment. And as Alice has said, it is still QA. We're hoping to have it available soon in the future to provide some assistance to the teaching academics. Alice, I believe the next slide is for yourself, and we'll go through the subject outline tool and some of those considerations.
Thanks so much, Ben. Just jumping back into screen sharing at the moment. Hopefully that doesn't take too long. Can everyone see my screen okay now? Fantastic. Thanks for those little nods. Appreciate it. All right. Thanks so much, Ben, for sharing that tool and for putting all the time to develop it. I know that it's been quite a lot of work behind the scenes with a lot of sort of decision-making trees and a lot of iteration and a lot of work QAing from our EDs as well. So yeah, thanks for that. It's a really great piece of work and it'll be really exciting to be able to make that available to our academic teams. Okay, so now that we've had a look at some of the options that are available to you, both standalone and integrated, what I'd like to do now is show you what the design process might look like when you put it all together. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a theoretical example using a fictional first-year journalism subject so we can explore some of the decisions that are involved in pivoting an existing non-supervised task to an integrated supervised assessment task. Now, this is a theoretical example, so you won't find this in the subject outline tool. I did select journalism as I spent many years teaching it, so I feel confident speaking to the design process. However, regardless of your discipline, these are some of the design decisions that you'll be making within your own subjects. Excuse me. So in the table below, you can see our starting point. We have 3 written tasks, all non-supervised, totaling 4,500 words and 45 notional hours. So our goal is to introduce a supervised assessment task without requiring a full redesign of tasks, changes to the subject learning outcomes, or an increase in student workload. At the curriculum architecture level, we aren't actually going to be making a lot of changes. Rather, what we're going to be doing is making some small pivots and tweaks. So as you can see, I've highlighted assessment 2 as I've identified this one as a strong candidate for an integrated supervised element, as it already requires students to analyse, interpret and make judgments about media coverage. The written analysis can show me my students' thinking, their analysis, their evaluation and their interrogation of news values and how they manifest differently across different publications. Adding a mini Viva element, discipline focused in this case, is going to allow me to surface their reasoning, discuss their thinking, and verify that their analysis is genuinely their own. So what did our theoretical design team do to make this pivot? First, they slightly tweaked the conditions of assessment item 2. This was already a task where students were analysing media coverage. Oh, sorry, did this... No, just someone I'm not on mute. Oh, good. This was already a task where our students were analysing media coverage and demonstrating their understanding of news values and framing. So the team didn't need to change what was being assessed. Rather, they changed how students demonstrated that understanding by adding a 10-minute discipline-focused mini Viva alongside the written analysis. The written analysis and the mini Viva will both be equally weighted. So the supervised component will be worth 25%. And then the artifact that the students will submit will be worth 25%. Now, to make room for that supervised element, the team has de-scoped the written component from 2,500 words to 1,500 words. This means that the total notional hours for the task don't change. it still sits at 25 hours. And I will show you a table where you can see all of this sort of mapped out. But again, we've not really made too many big changes from that original table. Still 25 notional hours, just a 1,000-word reduction, and we've inserted that 10-minute mini viva. Now, I will recommend the CSU Calibrating Student Workload Guide as a really useful resource when designing an integrated task, because it gives you a really structured way to ensure the overall assessment load stays manageable for your students. It will help you to make informed decisions about what to de-scope and by how much, so that you can add a supervised component with confidence that you're not overloading your students and that you're still, I guess, complying with the Calibrating Student Workload Guide. You'll also notice that the subject learning outcomes did not change, or you won't notice, but you will when I show you the next slide. So the same SLOs are being assessed across the same tasks. So we really haven't made any changes to the architecture of the constructive alignment. As I mentioned, there will be changes to the learning activities to ensure that we're setting our students up really well for success in that supervised condition, but the SLOs are remaining consistent. I've made sure that the supervised component, or our theoretical design team that is, has made sure that the supervised component is scheduled post-census across weeks 8 and 9, with students booking their own time via Microsoft Bookings. And this is going to give my students time to settle into the subject, engage with the learning content, spend time preparing and practicing, and complete the written analysis before the mini viva takes place. The team has also made sure that the learning activities in the subject scaffold students towards the mini viva. So they're building in more opportunities for class discussions, analysing news coverage, and peer conversations where they can practice articulation of news values and coverage so that our students are well prepared for the mini viva format. They've also clarified generative AI expectations. So for this task, Gen AI is permitted for research and preparation, but not during the supervised conversation itself. They've also designed stimulus material in the form of semi-structured questions for the mini viva that elicit evidence of the student's understanding, analysis, and interpretation. So I've just popped a few example stimulus questions up here. You'll also see in the menu that Ben went through before, there's some suggestions. Obviously, you are more than welcome to shape these however you want, create them from scratch, take them as it is, but they are there to kind of provide you with that guidance and support. So what we've done here is ensured that our questions are open-ended, not closed, with room for the assessor to ask follow-up and clarifying questions where needed. Now, if you're interested in support designing stimulus materials and prompts, as well as rubrics, I highly encourage you to attend our session on Thursday, as we're going to be taking a deeper dive into both rubrics and stimulus materials / prompts. If we now look to the table, you can see how our assessment sequence looks after the pivot. You can see highlighted in yellow what's changed. Assessment 2 is now a 1,500-word comparative analysis plus a 10-minute discipline-focused mini viva. And remember that those components are both equally weighted at 25%. The due date has shifted to variable. I should have highlighted that, meaning that students book their conversation time via Microsoft Bookings within a given window that is articulated by the teacher and in the subject outline. Everything else has essentially stayed the same outside of course, any changes that we need to make to the learning materials and the learning activities. Assessment 1 and Assessment 3 are unchanged. The total assessment word count for the subject has come down from 4,500 to 3,500, but the 10-minute mini viva accounts for that difference. The total notional hours remain the same, and there are no changes to the alignment of the subject learning outcomes to the assessment tasks. So we've made some really small changes. And now the subject has a supervised assessment component that is constructively aligned and is responsible to the assessment design principles. Now, obviously, when we look at it kind of in a theoretical sort of, written down on paper, it probably does make it seem a little bit more simple. There's obviously going to be messiness and complexity involved in this. But I think if you do follow this general structure and draw upon the resources that the DLT team has designed and provided, many of which you can find on the website, and also, of course, through our professional development sessions through the Teaching Academy, I think this will put you in good stead to be successful. And again, remembering that it is an iterative process. We will make mistakes. We will need to update and change things, and that's completely okay. We're very much learning as we go along this journey, as is everyone else in the sector. So once you've designed the task, you'll need to write it up in the subject outline tool. So I've just put together a bit of a cheat sheet here of the subject outline elements that you'll encounter in the SOT tool and some of the things that you might need to think about in the context of supervised assessment. So things like a really clear descriptive title for the task, making clear that the task involves a supervised component, remembering that our supervised components need to have that 30% minimum weighting, so a standalone task weighting minimum 30%, and an integrated, both those elements together need to be 30% minimum weighting for the subject. Remember to tick the supervised assessment box in the SOT tool. That's kind of like saying ATM machine. It's an easy thing to miss. It seems really straightforward, really obvious, but it is an easy thing to miss. When we're looking at our weighting value, are we looking at numerical value or satisfactory and unsatisfactory grading? Unsatisfactory, satisfactory grading is, of course, a bit more common in certain disciplines like health and nursing. So again, if you're going to go with that particular grading format, you'll need to ensure that that is in the SOT tool, SOT. Ensure integrated assessment tasks and non-supervised components are equally weighted. When we're thinking about due dates, because you will be conducting your supervised assessment task most likely across a period of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on your cohort size, it could be more potentially, and depending on how many markers you have. Include that variable date in both the subject schedule and in the assessment item details. So the assessment item detail will generally just say variable, but then in the subject schedule, you can be a lot more specific. So you can say, this is when our supervised assessment commences, and you can update the weeks that sort of follow where that supervised assessment will be placed. Consider assessment sequencing to avoid overloading your students. So we really would love to avoid having, students have to conduct a couple of supervised assessments in a single week. There may be cases where that is simply unavoidable, but if it is something that you can avoid, then it's definitely great to think about that. Avoid supervised assessment items due pre-census date. Where possible, it's great to think about scheduling those towards the end of the session. Again, it gives students time to get familiar with the format, with what's being expected of them, gives them time to practice and prepare, really puts that scaffolding and support around them before they get to that actual supervised assessment task. Thinking about the length of the unsupervised element where the task is integrated. Thinking about the duration of the task for the supervised component, including preparation and reading time. Where integrated tasks are used, other tasks in the subject may need to be reduced in scope or length. So I've had a little bit of a chat about that already, but I definitely recommend, again, that student workload calibration guidelines document. It's a really fantastic piece of work, and I found it very useful as I was writing this. The submission method. So depending on your assessment, there may not be a submission required if it's a standalone task. Other assessments integrated may require that Brightspace submission for that non-supervised artifact or component. In the task description, it's really important that we're using clear and concise language to explain what is expected of the student, what the task is going to involve, and how long it will take place, as well as whether the supervised component is online or in person. For integrated tasks, explain how the supervised and non-supervised components relate to each other, so it doesn't feel like they're two disparate tasks despite being integrated. It's really useful for our students to have that understanding, and important to recognise that they won't necessarily make those connections themselves. So sometimes, again, we do need to put that we need to ensure that communication is wrapped around the task description and in class as well. Where relevant, it's great to provide sample questions, examples of stimulus materials or examples, so students have an understanding of what type of task they will encounter, and hopefully allow them to practice and prepare adequately before the task to ensure their success. Framing the task in a way that helps students understand that the supervised element is designed to support them, not police them. It's really about demonstrating their learning. And again, I think emphasising that relational piece, that this helps us to get to know you, helps you to get to know us. It helps to really form that relationship that is such a key part of pedagogy and of a successful institutional approach. Clearly state what our students can and cannot access during the supervised assessment. So that might be they're allowed to bring along some notes, they might be allowed to bring along a reading, or they might not be allowed to bring anything along. So again, making sure that is really clear. And briefly outlining the supervised assessment process. I've seen some academics have kind of broken it down into like a sort of process and dot points, which I think is very helpful. So students know exactly what to expect on the day of the supervised assessment task. For the rationale, We want to outline the purpose of the task, clearly identifying which learning outcomes the task is aligned to and explaining how the task relates to real-world problems, if that is the case, many of the times it will be, professional settings, or other assessment tasks. And I've linked to the CSU Glossary of Common Instruction Words, which I think is a really helpful tool for sort of figuring out what those sort of action verbs might be that we're sort of using to describe and help justify why this assessment is essential to our students' success and learning. Marking criteria, again, this will be covered in a lot more depth and detail on Thursday, but at the most basic level, we want to be identifying what the task is assessing and what our students are going to be graded on. Presentation, so include details covered in the task description that specifically relate to presentation. How will the student complete their supervised assessment? What technology do they need? How will their identity be verified? And again, there's lots of resources to support you to articulate this on the DLT website. So definitely check out the Supervised Assessment website. And everything in here is linked as well. So when you get the copy of the PowerPoint deck, you can definitely go through and click those links. And if there's any requirements, so for example, if you've got submission and pass requirements, dress requirements, seeking special consideration, just anything that, kind of fits in this space. All right. So that pretty much wraps us up for the day. I do want to just share some resources that will support you to continue your journey in your supervised assessment design. So the Supervised Assessment website has frequently asked questions, which explore, again, a lot of what we've covered here today. So do not fear if anything is unclear or if I've gone through everything a little bit too quickly. We do only have a sort of set amount of time, but this is a fantastic resource. If it's not there, just let us know and if you've got a question, ask the question and we can add it to that website for others to benefit from. We've also got a session checklist that basically provides a structured guide for academics and markers who are facilitating supervised assessments. It walks you through the process and it's a really fantastic resource. We've got the alternative arrangements for supervised oral assessment resource. So it outlines examples of alternative arrangements that may be considered where a student has an approved study access plan. We also have the Microsoft Bookings Guide, which has a really great step-by-step guide and a how-to video series. And remember, you can always log a job to consult an educational designer. Some of our wonderful educational designers, I believe, are here today. They do amazing work. They're experts in learning experience and learning design. So if you would like to get connected with an educational designer to support you in this process, you can do so through Sherwell. Next, we have some resources to share with your students. So this is a student-facing website that articulates what supervised assessment is, how it fits with other assessments, how it will look in our courses, what identity verification students can expect, and how they can access support. We also have the Charlie blog, which provides a student-written first-person reflective narrative that covers what is supervised assessment, what the interactions feel like, how to prepare, and supporting practical understanding. So I think it's always great to hear straight from the students. So I think this is a really wonderful resource that really gives us an insight into what the experience is like for students and how other students can learn from their peers' experiences. And then we have the student preparation checklist for supervised assessment. So this helps them to understand what to expect, how to book their supervised assessment, how to prepare for the assessment, how to get set up, what they need to be conscious of when they're attending, and how to review and reflect after the supervised assessment. And then finally, we also have a student-facing technical troubleshooter guide to help them prepare for their supervised assessment, resolve common issues with their devices, and get prepared before the assessment begins. Just a heads up, I have mentioned it a few times already, but we do have a webinar coming up on Thursday where we're going to be looking at designing rubrics and prompts for supervised assessment. So this session is really designed to help us evaluate whether or not our existing rubrics are doing the job that they need to and identify where we can make targeted adjustments or redesign if needed, how we can design rubrics for both integrated and standalone supervised assessment options, how we can ensure that our rubric criteria and performance standards are transparent and meaningful for our students, and how to design effective prompts and questions to support interactions during the supervised assessment that strengthen assurance of learning and support consistent marking. And we'll also have the wonderful Lachlan joining us And he's going to walk you through how to set up your rubrics in Brightspace. So that really practical piece that will really help you get all of those elements lined up and ready to go. So I'll just share this one in the chat if I can. No, that's going to be a pain. I'll grab that in just a second. But moving on, we do have a little bit of time for Q&A or experience sharing. So again, if you've delivered or designed a supervised assessment and are willing to share a little bit about your experience, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you so much, everyone. Michael.
This is not experience sharing. This is just a question. So for that theoretical example you gave us before, you talked about the mini Viva would having to have a stretch of time just to run them, etc. Would have been there a fixed date for the written component as well?
Yeah, so generally you would expect the artifact to be submitted at a particular time. So maybe it's what did I say? We're going to do the supervised component.
Like weeks 8 and 9 was your Vivas, yeah, is what you're saying. So so how close would you have made the first due date?
I would definitely want to consider enough time for feedback provision. So because these tasks are so connected, we want to have time to get through the marking and for students to get the feedback and be able to sort of sit with it, respond to it, reflect on it. So if we have, 15 days is that the policy? Is it 15 days marking turnaround?
15 working days.
Yeah. So we'd have to kind of build that buffer in, I think, generally. That would be my approach.
Do you have to give feedback before you do these mini Vivas? No. So Lachlan's shaking ferociously.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your context, on your discipline, what the task is asking. For the theoretical task that I shared, I definitely think I would want to have that feedback provided to the students just in case there was any sort of anything in their thinking or their analysis that they might need to reconsider before they go into the mini Viva to kind of push them in the direction of success. But again, you'll know your discipline and your students' needs and what can be provided a lot better than I would. But yeah, those are the considerations I'd be taking into account.
Just slightly more on my shaking of the head there, Michael, as well. It's not to say you can't, it's just that we've seen examples of both instances where people have deliberately wanted a feedback loop prior to the supervised component happening. So there's that kind of gap identified, and others where essentially it's set at a time that's probably closer to the submission of the artifact, where the students have not had feedback on that submission before engaging the supervisor. Both have happened quite successfully. So that it comes back to, I guess, the conversation that you have with the ED or with your peers about the intent of the exercise.
Yeah, thanks, Lachlan. That's a really great point. Thanks, Michael. Lachlan, sorry, not Lachlan, Ben, are you still here? And would you be willing to pull out the app again and maybe give us a test run for a large group of 100 students? We've just had a request from Wendy who'd love to see what the tool actually suggests when we have those larger cohorts.
Sure, although I will preface this that we haven't fully QA'd what comes out at the end or each path, but let's see. All right, so Wendy, let's go large, 100 plus students. Let's say final year or post-grad, although we should start to think about whether or not they will be put together. Consider an integrated option for a supervised assessment. Let's say that we are looking for a student explaining or justifying their product. So here we have, and again, just provides with some example prompts for yourself to when you're coming up with your mini Viva. Some other things to consider. Again, we need to, us, the EDs and DLT as a whole would need to QA whether or not these are fully the options that we want to be suggesting. Some considerations for your context. So thinking about marking, thinking about having multiple assessors, thinking about keeping consistency across the rubrics and moderation, timing of it as well, some technology considerations, booking system. We've got Microsoft Booking, and some resources that we've got down the bottom as well that we will hopefully be able to link to once we kind of have this product finished and ready for everyone to use.
Thanks, Ben.
Does that help, Wendy? Thanks. All right. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jared.
Mine's a fairly simple question. So with supervised assessments, so you've got a whole heap of vivas or oral assessments scheduled for a week. Are we allowing the automatic 7-day extension for those kinds of assessments?
I believe generally not. Could I ask you to speak to that? I'm so sorry. I believe that it's generally not, but I don't want to give misinformation if I've misconstrued, or any of the EDs who might have worked on that.
So I didn't make it available, and that was based on advice that I got when I was setting it up. It was just too tight and I put variable dates because the presentation was due end of week 6, and then when students came back from the mid-session break, they did the supervised element. So we didn't make the 7-day extension available. And I think it fits into that part of policy where it's not available when there's a time-dependent assessment.
I feel like this is in the frequently asked questions, so I'm just going to pull that up. Sorry, I've just off the top of my head.
I'll just quickly respond then. So I guess in the future, with more and more assessments being supervised, there's going to be more and more assessments where they can't access that automatic 7-day extension. So the automatic 7-day extension is going to be less meaningful for them than it has been.
Where is it? Thank you for that question, Jared.
Can I say something? My name is Ruhina. I just ran a supervised assessment this semester, and part of it that I basically gave them to submit their evaluation and then started on a Sunday. That was it. And then from the following Monday, I started the 2 weeks of supervised assessment. I did not provide any 7-day extension, didn't stop students trying to get them. But it turned out to be the 7-day assessment was not for the actual presentation. They just couldn't get the evaluation component, which was the written component, up, and they booked in for the last week and wanted that 7 days. So that gave me a bit of a problem. I had to write them individually going, no, that it is not allowed. I know the system tells them that it is only going to be applicable. Didn't stop students trying to do it. So if that is any help next time, I'm going to make sure in every meeting I tell them, because obviously didn't stop them and the system doesn't stop them, and makes it then difficult for us who needs to actually look into the evaluation before they show up, because I'm having the interactive conversation with him regarding what they have done, good or bad. So, sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's a really fantastic point.
Just had an experience. That's the reason. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
If it is okay?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. I know that there is a conversation about whether if it is an integrated assessment, it needs to be divided 50-50. So my question is, can I have supervised component more than 50% if it is an integrated assessment?
I believe that you can. I believe that you can't underweight the non-supervised element, yes. But if required, you could slightly overweight the supervised
component. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahina, for that really great point about students still applying for the 7-day auto extension, even with those supervised tasks. I think that's something that I'll take away and share with the team and see if there's anything that we can put in place there. Maybe there's a drop-down menu or something that we can change to, is this task supervised? And if they click yes, then potentially it says, sorry, but for this task, you're unable to access
Yeah,
that
I think
7
it
day.
is the system that allows automatic extension. It is actually set up saying that if this task is not authorized, even if we are telling you, yes, you will not be allowed. But I don't think students read that much. They just click and then they expect I've done it. It's done now because it says it has been accepted. The headline doesn't tell them. So maybe we can change the headline. That might help.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
Thank you
leave
for
it
that
to you.
feedback. I'll
Yes.
put that before the team and we'll see what we can do. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Oh, Bex just let us know there is actually a project already to fix the 7 day auto extension workflows and improve the process. Fantastic. They're on top of it. All right, wonderful. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for sharing your time with us today. We really appreciate it and we hope you found the session useful. We will send you a copy of the recording and a copy of the slide deck. And of course, you can access all of those resources via the slide deck or the DLT website. And I also just want to say a big thank you to Lachlan for your support today and to Ben for developing that fantastic tool and for coming along and sharing some of your insights as an educational designer. All right, wonderful. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. And we hope to see you on Thursday at the next session.
Thank you.